Welcome in to the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I'm Rudo. That's Megan. Who has more Riz, Rob Blake or Danny Briere?
Danny Briere.
Okay. I think he got the better deal on this trade, for sure. We will talk about the Cup finals in a little bit, but the NHL doing us a solid and giving us some more news today. Ivan Provorov getting traded technically to the LA Kings first, and then flipped to the Columbus Blue Jackets in the end. Philly picks up a first and a second, and then also I think it's Sean Walker and Cal Peterson. They've been looking to move Provorov for a little bit. Columbus clearly in a place where they want to push to be more competitive rather than blow it up, given they're locked into guys like Johnny Gaudreau. This trade still feels a little bit weird to me, right? Philly has Carter Hart. Supposedly now they're looking to trade him. Where do you fall on this? Who is this trade the best for? LA, Columbus, or Philly?
It might be Philly.
Okay. I think they got the most assets for sure. I don't know. I think the first this year is a big deal for them. If they hit on that, I'd probably feel a lot better about the trade. I don't think that Provorov's going to be super easy to replace for them, though, is the problem.
I also don't think so. I just don't particularly like what Provorov brings to the table. I think he serves a necessary role in bolstering a back end. He's just a big, heavy player, and that is something that's going to be needed, especially after the loss of Gavrikov from the deadline. So, I see the value that he will then bring moving forward to a new team, but the Flyers have some work to do beyond the loss of Provorov. I think loading up on assets is smart because what they need to do is focus on sort of gradually rebuilding some things too. I don't know that they were ever in a place of immediate success anyways. That's why I could see this being a positive thing.
So if you're Danny Briere, are you looking to move Carter Hart for futures too then?
No, I do think they need to get some roster players. I mean, depending on who that is. Course, yeah. I think that, especially for Carter Hart, I think you need somebody who can fill in the NHL right now.
Carter Hart's had such a weird career there where at times he's supposed to be like the answer for them back there.
Yeah.
He hasn't lived up to that at times, but also he's been playing
Injuries
behind Philadelphia.
Have also plagued him, but you're right, he's been playing behind Philadelphia.
So
yeah, how good could Provorov really be?
It feels weird because we don't usually get real trades around this time.
No, I was really surprised by this. Someone said unceremonious. I kind of agree with that take. Yeah. I wasn't expecting a trade.
So, I mean, Cup finals are still going on. Usually they wait until it's over, but hey, I think everyone in Philly seems to hate Provorov at this point. So maybe it was just time to move on for them. As far as the Avs are concerned, I don't really know that this affects them much. Whatever ends up happening with Gavrikov may be more important, which there are also rumors about today saying he's looking for a 2-year deal.
An extension, which I was a little bummed about because I kind of wanted to see him shopped a little bit more. But it makes sense. He brought a lot of value to LA. And it's interesting, too. I wonder where LA benefits from this in the end, too. Are they clearing cap space for something?
It's kind of weird that they cleared cap space while retaining 30% on Provorov.
Right. It does feel like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth with that.
I mean, you're still right. It's just a weird way to go about it for LA. And everyone on Twitter has already mentioned it, but the big thing with Gavrikov supposedly looking for $6 to $7 million.
If it's closer to that 7, it's definitely it's 2 years that I think they're targeting. So I don't hate it, but that would have been a little pricey for another team.
I hate that means Devon Toews is going to get 9.
No, exactly. Honestly, I was immediately linking this to Colorado because I kind of liked Gavrikov. I was like, what would it take to bring him here?
For sure.
Hearing 6 to 7, that was a pipe dream. I don't know where that was coming from.
Yep. If it was 4,
yeah,
that'd be a fun conversation.
It's 4, but you'd get to play in Colorado.
Come on. It's worked for other people.
Come on.
Yeah, a little all over the place with that. Devontae's free agency situation obviously going to be very different. He'll be 30 at the end of next season, I believe, and then has a better track record than Gavrikov, obviously, with the last couple of years in Colorado. So I'll put it this way: I don't think it's getting any easier for the Avs to hang on to Devontae's.
No, this is setting the market standard for that caliber of player at that position, and Devon Taves he's a top pairing player.
Not that. He's on another level, to say the least. But you never know. Guys take discounts all the time. I'm sure this is something we'll talk about a ton next offseason. Coming into this offseason, and I want to talk about the Avalanche a little bit here. How quickly are we expecting the Avs to get things done? Can we reasonably expect the Avs to do anything before the draft?
I feel like it's reasonable to expect something, but I don't expect it to be the big 2C solution.
Yeah.
I think there's some things that hinge a little bit on the draft and then free agency. So I don't know. I could see them re-signing somebody, like coming to terms if they are looking at an internal option, perhaps. But that would maybe be to the benefit of the Avalanche to get that done.
Just having more knowledge about what they have to work with, I think, certainly from the team side would make sense. I just don't know that any of the players are super
motivated
to get it done yet. So I expect a slow month for Colorado until it's go time, and then it'll be
crazy,
a flurry of action for the most part. I'm guessing blind. How many guys do you think they bring back of their free agents? Like 3-ish? Because I'm off the top of my head, I'm assuming Confer's probably gone.
Me too.
You have Erod, who I'm 50-50 on. I'd like to see them bring him back. I don't know if they actually will. You have someone like Lars Eller, Eric Johnson.
I'm like penciling in Cogliano
if he's healthy, sure.
If he's healthy. And then beyond that, there's a lot of question marks. Like Erod is also who I'd like for them to bring back. But where I have the question mark is, have I overvalued how much he liked being in Colorado versus how much he wants to get paid?
Yeah.
And if so, I wouldn't then maybe count that as a sure thing. I think it'd be very wise to do that with Erod, just because I'm also assuming Comfer is not someone they'll be able to afford to keep. So that's sort of at least two that I have. And then...
Yeah. All right. I'll put it this way. I would bring back EJ as, like, if he wants to be a seventh.
If he wants to keep playing.
But if you're bringing back EJ, you have to understand what you're getting out of him is the thing. And that's not a guy that you can move up into the top four of your lineup anymore. So I wouldn't be opposed to bringing him back. I just would like the Avs to understand he doesn't fill the role he used to anymore. If it came to that. I really don't expect them to bring Jack Johnson back again. I would be a little surprised if they did that.
Someone in the chat said one Johnson, and I agree. I do think if any Johnson, which I'm not 100% sold on, I think it's one.
Yeah.
Not both.
Agree.
For similar reasons, like you just said, they have to know what they are getting out of that player. And I thought Jack Johnson in his short time at the end of this year did well, but you can't have two of that type of player.
Exactly.
At this stage.
In theory, Josh Manson should be healthy next year too, so there's just a little bit less room on that blue line.
Definitely. They've got some big decisions to make too that will make that flexibility less possible.
Yep. You can never count on health, but if you get even 60 games out of Bowen Byram instead of 40.
Right.
With any amount of injury luck, the Avs really shouldn't have to do a lot of work on their back end to put it together. It would be depth guys like a number 6, a number 7, things like that.
They should bring Andres Anglin back.
Hey, if he's out there, if he wants like $850K, Sure.
I'm saying that half jokingly. I'm not sure I'm sold on that because I do feel like there's a lot of people who could satisfy that role of 7th, 8th man beyond Andreas Englund. So I say it a little tongue in cheek.
Look, you're right. There are a lot of people that can fill that role, but we've seen pretty consistently with Colorado, they're really comfortable going back to guys they know, going back to guys that have played in this system before. Obviously, Matt Nieto last year. You look a couple years ago during the shortened season when they went with Carl Soderberg and Patrick Nemeth. Now, those didn't work out very well, but they tried. Exactly, they tried. So it's something that would not shock me if that came up. It's just it's weird because you're seeing a lot of NHL news right now, and it's just none of it's about Colorado. I think they're pretty comfortable to wait, and hopefully the NHL Combine going on this week. Once that's over, maybe it stirs up a little bit more action as teams start to solidify their draft lists and things like that, and understand where they want to be as far as picks are concerned. But as far as Colorado goes, I wouldn't expect a whole lot of anything for the next couple of weeks. All right. On that note, we are brought to you by the fantastic people over at Illegal Pete's. You can go get happy hour from 3 to 8 p.m. now, the longest happy hour in town. You got 5 hours to go down there, get yourself a delicious burrito, get yourself a margarita or a beer, or what's a fancy drink that people drink? I drink screwdrivers.
Tequila Sunrise.
There you go. Perfect. Go get yourself a Tequila Sunrise if that's what you're into. That's fancier than anything I order. All right, give me some OJ, give me some vodka. That's my happy hour drink. Which they have those too at Illegal Pete's if that's what you want. You don't have to be fancy. Their burritos are amazing, fresh ingredients used all over the place. Their queso, the best around. If you haven't tried it, go check them out. Go get yourself a burrito. Go spend some time on the pad. Actually, a nice day today.
Beautiful.
Not rainy, so a great day for the Illegal Pete's patio. Go check them out, and then when you're sitting out on the patio, make sure you're wearing your Shady Rays. Looking good, not getting blinded by the sun. Sunglasses are, I guess they're technically, I can't say that they're like medically approved because they're definitely not. But as someone who had to get LASIK and had bad eyesight because he looked into the sun as a kid, highly recommend you wear sunglasses so you don't go blind. They have tons of different options and choices for types of sunglasses. Personally, I like the super awesome 80s wrestler ones, but you can also just get aviators or solid looking sunglasses. Choices all over the place, different styles, different colors, different, what's the polarizations? Yeah, that's the word that I'm looking for. But the best part is their replacement policy. You go to shadyrays.com, you order with code DNVR, you get 2 pairs or more, you get 50% off your order. And then in the first month, if you lose them, you break them, or you just don't like them, they'll replace them for completely free. So you can just try whatever sunglasses you want till you find a pair, get a good one, and then you're good to go. Also, they got ski and snowboard goggles, so go check out those if you're on the slopes.
That sounds correct.
Are you a skier, snowboarder? Not at all? Okay. I skied growing up. I wasn't cool enough to snowboard, so... A second period here, an interesting point from Anthony in the chat saying, don't forget about Malinsky. It's a fair point, but one I'm not jumping to conclusions to, because with someone like Malinsky, the way his season is going to shape up is likely going to depend a lot on how his training camp goes.
Totally.
We could come out of training camp and go, yeah, this is a guy who's fighting for a roster spot, or we could come out of training camp and say, still got work to do. I just am not sure where that will end up. I know you've seen a bit more of him than me, Megan. Which way do you lean on that with Malinsky?
I have reservations just because of how they've been with this position specifically. Like who they've opted to call up has been Brad Hunt types, Jacob McDonald. Eventually, it got down to Andreas Englund, but that was even a bit of a surprise that it ever got that far in the queue. Yeah. And the reason I pointed out is I look at it like a Justin Barron comparable, where his NHL debut was short-lived. It took a while, and he was playing well at the American League level. He was a younger player and a different style of player because Malinsky is 25 years old. Yeah. So there is something to be said for him being physically more matured and ready than maybe others that have come before him. But I also am with you. I'm not quite envisioning a full season for him at the NHL level just yet.
I wouldn't go that
I
far,
think
sure.
they'll be very interested in considering giving him looks, though, especially training camp, preseason, but even in the regular season. I do think he'll make his NHL debut. I feel that way because I think they'll want to see how he looks. But whether or not he sticks is where I don't have that much confidence yet.
And keep in mind, regardless about how you feel about him, the Avs do have Curtis McDermott for another year, which at least in the regular season, they will use as a depth defenseman. We've seen that at this point.
What I find interesting, too, is Andreas Englund and Keaton Middleton were almost the exact same player. Yeah. And they've re-upped him, and he's now kind of at the top of this queue. So,
captaincy for Eagles,
okay,
maybe?
why not Ryan Wagner is what I wanted to know.
He's been around, too, yeah.
He is a big voice in the room. They love Keaton Middleton. I could definitely see that for him, especially now that they have him for the short, long term. At least 2 more years, I think it was.
For the AHL tweener, that's long
Exactly.
term.
The turnover in that league is so much so that when I talked about Andreas Englund, I actually have to probably look at Keaton Middleton as being the new Andreas Englund in that type of role. So that's just something to consider. But it raises an interesting point, too. Like, what do you do with a player like Mikhail Maltsev?
Is that kind of been stuck down there a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
Is that somebody that the Avs look at bringing back, even if it's at the American League capacity? Or do you think that's someone that both parties have reason to move on from one another?
I think it's tough. If I'm Maltsev, I think I probably want to move on. The Avs' commitment to Ben Myers, I think, really made his path to the NHL a lot harder. And I know, injuries and things out of his control did happen.
Right.
But there's maybe room, and maybe that's something I haven't considered. I've been a proponent of wanting to bring back Lars Eller this year. Maybe you go with Maltsev instead if you can get him on a little bit of a cheaper deal. But I think Maltsev could be an NHLer. Maybe even should be. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked with the Avs.
I wonder, too, if not for the injury this year, he would have been one of the first in the call-ups for forwards.
I would assume so, yeah.
And we would have seen more of him because when we did see him briefly, he actually looked like he was making improvement in his game that was necessary of him to at least stick in the NHL. And it'll be interesting. I agree with your assessment of him, though, and they kind of have Ben Myers already there. Yep. Do they bring back an Alex Galchenyuk too?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think I'd have Galchenyuk ahead of Maltsev today.
Well, especially because they saw so much more of him so much more recently, and they had this interest in him as a PTO at the beginning of last year that I think that there's just distance that has grown between Maltsev and the Avs organization. I don't think it's rooted in negativity. It just, things happened, injuries happened.
And look, if he wants to be here, I'm sure the Avs would happily have him as a depth forward option. But I suspect Maltsev would probably like a chance somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, on to the topic that we're actually going to talk about today, which is the Stanley Cup Final. Game 2 was not close ever. It was just a blowout from start to finish. Let me start here. How much credit are you giving Adin Hill? And how much are you saying Florida's not doing enough? At 5-on-5, Florida created less than one expected goal for. On the flip side, Florida's power play was super dangerous all game, and Adin Hill shut it down.
That's interesting because I was looking at the high danger chances side by side, and this is where Florida improved from game 1 into game 2, but obviously the improvement was not single-handedly enough. Yeah. They were still pretty limited to the outside, but they did a much better job of generating more chances on the whole, but also more dangerous ones right at the net front. Interestingly, though, there wasn't a lot of variance beyond perimeter and net front. There wasn't really a lot generated just more generally within home plate, and I think that's what hurt them is they were looking for like high skill play up front or taking their chances from the outside, and I think they just needed to have a little bit more variety in what they attempted because what really happened is Adin Hill played very well. That's the bottom line. even though Florida like improved on this one area from game 1 into game 2, it still wasn't enough because of their shortcomings too. Their D-zone coverage continues to be a problem. They allowed way too many odd man rushes, and their situational awareness is just not as good compared to Vegas's. That's the issue with Florida on the whole right now in my eyes. And so even though they did some things a little better from one game into the next, Adin Hill played very well, and Vegas did a great job. Like what I'm describing in Florida, maybe not being able to get all of the chances that they wanted, that's because of Vegas too, the way that Vegas wants to play. And they did a great job of blocking shots and making it very difficult for Florida to really create inside home plate.
So I guess how does Florida do that? Because you once again saw Matt Tkachuk and Alexander Barkov not get on the score sheet. I actually thought Matt Tkachuk was a little bit more impactful, that big hit on Eichel, obviously. But
right.
I just don't see how Florida is competitive if those guys aren't producing for them. Is there a way to break through Vegas's side, or does Vegas just have them locked down?
I think there is a way, but the path forward, it's growing more narrow and more difficult, winding, because it feels like Vegas is a boa constrictor and they have Vegas around the neck. Yeah. And they're just tightening and tightening up their game, that Florida's way out of that situation is becoming very limited in their options. Because I do think Barkov and Tkachuk had a better game. Tkachuk specifically, I think had a much better game 2 than game 1. But discipline remains an issue for the team as a whole. This is costing them in a big way because...
Right away, the Lomberg penalty to start the game is terrible. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like there are actually things that they're doing in their execution. Like, if you had just kept doing that and didn't get undisciplined, you probably would have seen a different game.
Yeah.
And that seems like what's costing them right now, because I think there is a way to break through. They just have to play a much more disciplined game.
So let's flip it to the other side then. Did Bob crack, or is Vegas just beating him?
I think Bob cracked a little in this one. I had defenses for him in game 1 a little bit more. And then with Bob, I would be also a little frustrated with the rest of the team too. In some of these situations, when I describe situational awareness, I'm looking at guys like Ekblad and
Ekblad's been bad in this
Mahura,
series,
who shouldn't be overcommitting to guys doing so and allowing way too much time and space. And so there are goals that I'm like, okay, that one might have been Bob, or that one might have been the team in front of him that allowed that odd man rush to begin with.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit of both, but definitely with Bob in this game, he lost a little bit more composure, I felt. There were some things I know there was traffic and screens, but he just wasn't tracking the puck so well on some of these.
It's that third goal for me. The first two,
agree.
There's a screen, sure, whatever. The third one, sure, it's a guy walking in tight, but he beats you short side. I mean, you're just out of position at that point. That's a puck that can't go in your net. So I really do think that... I'll put it this way. We put a poll out on should they start Bob or Lyon for game 3. 80% of people still said Bob.
I voted Bob.
Okay. So I don't think Florida really has another option. We saw earlier in the playoffs, Lyon was not good against Boston. And so they kind of are just hoping that Bob figures it out through the rest of this series. And you're right. He could use significantly more help from his defense. I think particularly Florida has been brutal on the back check. One of the goals the other night, Sam Bennett just gets beat up the ice clean and it ends up in their net. So is there a team aspect to it? Yes. But Bob also just needs to track the puck better.
I agree with that. And that's why of the two options, I'm still leaning towards not only just like the expertise or the experience is what I'm looking for with Bob, but having a goaltender come in kind of cold into the series, like not even just into the game, but into the series, it feels ill-advised because we've watched it be not a good idea with that Boston series. And like Boston's side of things, getting cute with goaltending has costed teams. And that's why I'm like, I can't endorse that then in the Stanley Cup final.
Even if you were thinking maybe that was something you would do, Alex Lyon didn't play super well coming in relief in this game either.
And I'll grant him some allowances, but...
Oh, totally. He's coming in cold. But
no, it was not good.
It wasn't a performance that you're like, oh, maybe we start this guy. It was like, oh no, this is bad. It's really tough for me to see a X's and O's way out of this for Florida. I don't see some great change that Paul Maurice can exploit on Vegas. It's just their best players have to start getting it done. They have to find a way to beat Adin Hill. And if they don't, then this could be a very quick series. Now, Florida is going home. They always say you're not in trouble until you lose at home. They have to win both at home to me. If they go down 3-1, I don't see them coming back in this series. But we've talked a lot about Florida's side. We should give some credit here to the top guys on Vegas's end. Marchessault has been fantastic for them in the second half of these playoffs. Jack Eichel proving everyone right, wrong, I guess, depending on how you feel about him, that he is a guy that deserves to be on this stage. And maybe it was a little bit Buffalo's fault that he hadn't played a playoff game until now. I really am. If Florida doesn't find something in Game 3, I don't know what you can do but just tip the cap to Vegas.
And I agree with that too. I think it's a perfect opportunity to give Vegas credit because of the way that they're constructed. It's a lot of players that are helping them to be as well constructed, well-rounded as they are right now. Like, it's top guys like you mentioned, Marchessault, Eichel, but we've talked about their depth at length, and they're all stepping up in big ways. Adin Hill, of course, too, having the
playing out of his mind
series of a lifetime is also helpful, but it's just the way that they like to play. They don't need to make changes, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Their game plan, it's working, and we didn't even say, but like for Florida's side of things too, they're going to lose one of their depth defensemen.
Yeah,
it's already not good for them.
Yep.
And where I was going with Vegas, though, is there isn't a huge injury that we know about. Like, even Eichel returns to the game.
Exactly.
And so there really isn't a lot that's going to change from Vegas' side. They're going to continue coming at Florida in waves, and they have this pretty well handled at that point.
Yeah, it does feel like the clock might be striking midnight for Florida's Cinderella run, for sure. I hope it's not. I hope this series goes 7 at this point.
I do too.
It doesn't feel like that's the way things are headed there. All right, let me ask you this. How much credit does Bruce Cassidy get for getting Vegas here? Because I think we all knew Vegas was a good team, but did we think they were going to be this good?
It is a little bit, we're talking about systems. The way that they like to play in front of Adin Hill has helped them to be as strong a team as they are now, but also the way Adin Hill is. And that comes from a leadership in their coach that holds them accountable to executing these systems consistently and to expectation. And I look at someone like a Barbashev who comes in newly to this group and acclimates so well. I like the side-by-side of how things I don't want to say they didn't go well for him in St. Louis, but he didn't have as much of an impact, especially in their more recent playoff run, versus what he's doing now with Vegas. And I think some of that is credit to the system, and that is something that is coached. And it's a combination of everything, though. This group of players that they've brought together also buys into that system. And so that's where it's a little bit of everyone. So I have to give Cassidy some credit for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of credit. And again, don't get me wrong. I think Vegas is a very good team, a team that I probably undersold throughout times at this year. But getting the right coach in there matters. It takes a good team to what we're seeing Vegas do right now. On that note, make sure if you are getting constricted by a boa constrictor at the zoo or something and it's not your fault, that you call Bacchus and Shanker. You can call 222-2222 today. I don't think that scenario is very likely, but more realistic if you were in a car accident, even if it's a ride-share situation or you were biking on the road and got hit, or even if you got hurt at work and it's not your fault. That's what Bacchus and Shanker does. They take on those cases, they win them, and they get you the money you deserve. So if you press 2 for a while, they'll give you a free consultation. If they think you have a case, they will take it on for completely free. You pay nothing until you win your case. So if you think you might have one that's literally costs you nothing, you might as well give it a shot. You can go to coloradolaw.net as well to get a hold of them. They've won over $1 billion for their clients over the 25 years they've been doing this in Colorado. So they know a thing or two about this. They're pretty good at doing it. Check out Bacchus and Shanker today. Press 2 for a while. Get yourself the money you deserve. And last but certainly not least, our favorite beer sponsor, brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery. 8 different kinds on tap down here at the bar. Dozens of flavors that you can get your hands on. I tell everyone there's a Breck Brew flavor that you will like if you like beer. If you hate all beer, then it's probably not for you. But if you drink beer at all, Breck Brew has a flavor that you will enjoy. It can be simple like me, just like an Avalanche Amber. You can get something fancy. I know AJ's a fan of the Strawberry Sky or the Vanilla Porter usually. Megan, I don't know. We still got to do this flight of beers.
I was going to say, Tiff, do you know what kind you like?
Yes. I'm a big fan of the Mountain Beach and the Strawberry Sky.
Okay.
I like sweeter beers, but I also really like the Avalanche Amber.
Is Mountain Beach like a summer shandy?
Sour.
Oh.
Which is the one that has like coconut in it?
Ooh, I don't know.
That also sounds really good.
Okay. They do have a shandy. They have a seasonal shandy that they do, so you can try that one. That one's downstairs. But the Mountain Beach, I would say if you don't like sours, it's probably like one of the best sours. But
Interesting, because I actually do like sours, so it's probably fantastic.
Yeah. I really like that one. So yeah, we'll definitely, I don't know, maybe we'll try the fruity ones first, and then we'll do like the darker ones. IPAs and ambers.
Fruity flight in the summer, dark flight in the winter. You're good to go.
That was very responsible of you to break it up and not try to have just all
Megan's drinking 30 beers today.
at once.
I don't see why not.
Go check out Breck Brew. Even if you're not local, they have it in all 50 United States. Use the Breck Beer Locator online at breckbrew.com. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. Have you liked this Cup Finals?
So far, no, because it's felt very one-sided. Like, I want to put an asterisk by that because there have been plenty of moments that these look like two teams who both belong here, but Florida is just kind of allowing their own undoing. It does seem like mentally they get in their heads. It's where you see the undisciplined actions and you see some of those situational awareness mistakes being made that are really avoidable. And so anyways, where I was going with this is I am a little disappointed because I thought Florida would put up a little bit more of a fight with the way that they like to play. I thought it was going to match a little more closely with Vegas.
Yeah, and game 2, pretty irredeemable, I think. Game 1, Florida gets an early lead. These are two teams that like to play from ahead when they can. That was a little bit disappointing for me to see Florida not be able to play their game with a lead. And the first 2 periods were okay. It's not like they played horribly or anything.
I agree.
But boy, it does feel like the pressure's getting to Florida's side a lot more than it is Vegas's. And I'm someone who looks up funny stats all the time. I need Florida to at least win one game so they can say they've won a Stanley Cup final game in their existence. Because going 0 for 8 in the finals would be a tough look. Leave it that way. On Vegas' side, I think this is a team that looks experienced, a team that has a good number of guys that have been here before and aren't afraid of the moment. So I've never been a guy that's huge on experience matters a ton, but I think having some of those guys as their leadership core really is making a difference in this series. Where obviously through the Avs run, we experienced a little bit of leadership from everywhere. Everyone knows about the Cogliano story. Everyone knows how the Avs kind of operate in the locker room as a group. Do you think Vegas is similar to that, or is there more of a few leaders that are stepping up and being the vocal guys there?
Feels like it is distributed among a few voices in the room. And part of it too is the way that they play hockey is the contributions are also coming from several different players. It just feels like one thing we've noticed about like the Avalanche 2022 team is they were very self-motivated. They didn't require a lot of coaching. They reached this point of success where everyone was so bought in that they were doing things. And that's kind of, I don't want to draw too much of a comparison between the two, but that's sort of how I feel about Vegas. Is why I think their depth is as successful as it has been is because everyone's contributing and they're self-motivated. And that's why I would lean towards those also being voices in the room spread out throughout this group. Did we really sign Wyatt Ahmet?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm so excited.
Is chat for real or is chat baiting us? I don't know.
Look, I'm an easy. I think
I won't put it up until we know.
So there you go. I said the Avs weren't going to do anything, and they go and do something. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they did.
So another potential option for the Avs on defense. I think, I would expect him to be more of an Eagles staple than. I would put Sam Malinsky ahead of him on the call-up list no matter what. I'll put it to you that way.
I would too. I actually use Ahmet sort of as a frame of reference for how good actually Malinsky is because of how well he
jumped right
integrated
into pros,
compared to Ahmet.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for him, and they brought all of his friends from Minnesota State over, so it would have been really sad if they didn't re-sign him.
Yeah, I think the Avs have done a little bit of this, and we don't talk about this a ton because it is what it is. Most people focus on the NHL and aren't as worried about how an AHL roster shapes up. But the Avs have done a pretty good job over the last handful of years of building from the bottom up. They sort out their AHL lineup. They understand who their guys are that could have potential to move up to the NHL lineup, and then they sort out their NHL lineup. Now, when you're as injured as you are last year, doesn't really matter how you set up your team. Things just fall apart.
Yeah.
But in 2022, they had a lot of that. The Avs used plenty of call-ups that year at times, and it's because of how they built all the way down to their last guy on their AHL roster. So I do think guys like Ahmet do matter in that way. And NHL impact, probably pretty minimal.
Yeah, but I think about how when a Sean Behrens does make the leap one year, you want to have him surrounded by a strong D-core that sets a good example beyond just who he's paired with. And so it is important to put care into that part of the organization as well.
And I think it is worth noting that a lot of these defensemen are coming back. Compare that to a Sampo Ranta who decided to go to Europe. Schneeks have something to do with that, probably coaching up these defensive kids.
I'm glad you said it because I know the concern, like I think it was Merrick or Friedman talking about how I believe it's Sam Malinsky specifically said he chose Colorado because of Greg Cronin. And I've sort of heard the same thing from Malinsky, but it was a greater conversation about the entirety of the coaching staff because he works closely with Schneekloth and he loved it so far. So I don't think we can discredit Schneekloth's role in that, especially with the defensemen, because I've talked to both Ahmet and Malinsky about Schneekloth, and they really like him. He really likes them. I think it's a good relationship.
So there you go. Hopefully more progress forward seen from those kids coming back on the defensive side for the Eagles. Richie mentions this about Matt Tkachuk with a ridiculous amount of penalties. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the end of these games where Florida kind of goes full goon in games they know they've lost?
I don't like it.
I'm with you.
I think it's the kind of thing that has a carryover effect. It honestly, too, it walks a fine line like Jamie Benn's undisciplined
Clearly
actions
too far,
costing his team in losing him. And I feel similarly with Tkachuk that he's walking a very thin line there that they cannot afford.
Well,
and it just,
done.
Bednar has talked about this in players showing emotion too, and he would prefer them not to because it lets the other team know that you've gotten in their heads. And if I'm Vegas, this is where this boa constrictor imagery really, it's like they have Florida exactly where they want them. It's an interesting, like, it's not to say that Vegas isn't partaking a little bit on their own side of things, but it's not equal. It's definitely more significantly Florida getting into that, and it's a bad look. Like, if I'm Vegas, I'm drawing positives from that.
I agree. Like, if you see this 2 games in a row from Vegas' side, you're saying, hey, look, we get a lead on these guys, and they're going to melt down. They're going to blow up. And
it's a vulnerability.
I've never been a big fan of it. I know there are a lot of people in the hockey world that understand that stuff as something saying, hey, you need to send a message that they're not going to give away these things for free. If it's not working out on the actual hockey, they're going to pay a price physically. And I don't really agree with that. I think the price physically you should be making them pay is that Tkachuk hit on Jack Eichel. I thought that was great. A clean hit, part of a hockey play. Awesome. Sam Bennett continues to bring a physical edge for Florida, even if the rest of his game is struggling. Those are the physical type of plays that I think send a message more than nonsense at the end of a hockey game that just doesn't matter to me. So I guess we're the wrong podcast if you think that stuff is...
Well, and I will say, like, with Tkachuk and Eichel, what I didn't like is you see that play in real time and it looks bad, but then you see it slow down and it is not a problem. Yeah. Eichel is falling.
Yep. Tkachuk doesn't hit him in the head or anything.
It's shoulder to shoulder. If Eichel wasn't falling, it wouldn't have been such an odd point of contact and things like that. But Eichel answering for it the way that he was sort of left no choice to and penalized for that is a tough thing, because it's like, this was a clean hit.
Yep. One of my least favorite things about the NHL in recent history is hits like that happen and teams immediately just jump each other. And
I get it. Maybe at ice level, they're seeing something really differently in the moment.
Yeah, of course. And hockey has always had a very big culture of defending your teammates, regardless of it being a clean hit or not. But I would like to see punishments to be a little bit harsher. The instigating rule has been in the NHL for a while now. And when someone puts a clean hit like that and then everyone on both teams has to answer the bell, it's just a little silly to me.
I agree, especially like when the player who conducted the clean hit initially ends up penalized at the end.
Gets a 10-minute misconduct out of what was initially a clean play. So it's tough for me, but I don't need to rant about terrible NHL officiating any more than I already do. So won't go any further into that. Here's my one fear. I have many fears. Here's one of my biggest fears.
The one and only fear.
For Florida. If they want to turn this series around, I just don't know how they can keep up with Vegas. We've seen their defense just get skated by far too many times. And I don't know how they keep Vegas in front of them. So, I know we all picked Florida in the initial preview. If you ask me today, I might take Vegas in 5.
Oh, yeah. I'm feeling a little silly. Like, I don't know the word for it, but I stood by what I said because I had this reasoning for it. But I feel really differently about the series just 2 games in. It doesn't mean, like we've talked about, that I don't believe there to be any path forward for Florida, but Vegas is the more consistent, stable team, and what they're bringing to the table. It's hard not to say that that's where I would put my money.
And look, in our preview, we kind of said, hey, if one of these goalies cracks, that team is just going to lose.
100%.
I think Bob cracked last night, and maybe he comes back in game 3 and is back to a super amazing goalie. But if he struggles in game 3, forget it.
The team melting down through their extracurriculars in front of him, it's really hard for a goaltender to keep composure in net behind. It feels like that's a difficult ask, and another reason why Florida harms the overall good in doing that.
Agree. It's easy to lose your focus mentally when games devolve like that, for sure.
Especially when their penalty kill isn't working
at all. And it's a little tough for me. I actually did think Florida's power play was pretty good last night, except for they just couldn't score.
Couldn't capitalize.
And right now, that's a huge difference in this series. Is after what was a shorthanded goal to start the series for Florida, they've just been dominated on special teams.
Yeah, and going into it, they actually had the better track record with special teams. That was one reason I chose Florida in the beginning, but it has not held up for Florida.
Vegas's penalty kill was at 65% coming into this series, and they have not given up a power play goal. So there's been so little news from the Combine because it's still underway. It goes this entire week. It started on the 4th. It doesn't end until this Friday. So most of the news will probably come out after all the teams finish their interviews with players. So once interviews start coming out, once teams start talking about who they talk to, that's when lists start to get solidified. I can tell you right now, that's our plan. After this week, next week is when AJ and I will start going ham on all the prospect stuff. So wait till next week, and we got you covered on that. I'm good for this one, Megan, unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, we're going to be talking about this plenty more to come. We're actually going to have Katie Gauze come on and talk about the Florida side of things, which I feel bad like bringing her on now, but hopefully there's some, they can get one or two at home.
I mean, you have to have one, obviously.
Right.
Really, you have to have two, I think.
Definitely.
All right, we're going to get out of here. We will be doing, or at least I will be doing a watch along for Thursday's game. So we'll see if Florida can get back into the series or not. If you want to join me and have some fun with that. Also, if you didn't check out our roundtable piece from yesterday, go read that on the website.
It's so poorly.
Hey, I said Anton Lundell was someone to watch and he scored at that game. So I'm counting that as a W, okay? We got one tiny thing right.
It's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
That's just how the cookie crumbles.
That's hockey. If we could get it right every time, I'd be winning a lot of money in Vegas and not doing this job. So we appreciate all y'all, and we will be back tomorrow.